Hello and welcome to this Writing Center webinar on writing a research abstract for the DU Research and Scholarship Showcase. My name is Juli Parrish. I direct the University Writing Center, and I want to talk to you about how to recognize the moves needed to produce an abstract for the showcase and some strategies for how to produce those moves yourself. Now, if you have any questions about the larger context of the showcase, maybe deadlines or application components, logistics, please write to or consult the website and email at the bottom of the screen. So that's www.du.edu/UAP/showcase, or the email address that you can see there as well. An abstract is pretty simply a summary, but it's a summary that includes certain kinds of predictable information. So it's almost always, in this case, a summary of a research or a review article or project, and it includes critical information, including a complete reference to the work, in this case, the title of your abstract, and then its purpose, methods, conclusions, and implications. So it's actually the opposite of an abstract that we might think of in terms of abstract art. In this case, the abstract is very, very specific. You might encounter abstracts most frequently when you are doing research, looking for articles, for example, in the library database. If you were trying to decide which of these articles was most relevant to your project, you might click on the listing and read the short paragraph that describes the article to decide which of these are worth my time, which of these are going to advance my project most clearly. In the case of the showcase, your abstract will appear in a program and readers will do that same process. A potential audience member may skim abstracts to decide, if I've only got a limited amount of time, which abstracts should I look at? Which writers should I talk to? So the abstract is helping potential audience members decide how to spend their time, what to do. And that's really one purpose of the abstract. It's to help readers make decisions. It's to help audience members decide, where should I go? How should I spend my time? For the showcase, your abstract should be no more than 150 words or 1,200 characters with spaces maximum. So that's not a lot of space, and you're going to probably have more material than you need, and your work will involve cutting. You basically want to include just 5 elements. What is your motivation for the project? What is the problem statement? What is your approach to that problem? What are your results? And what are the implications of your results? Anything else probably won't stay in the abstract. You might not have any citations. You probably won't have any quoted material. You're just going to address these 5 things. Now, in the upcoming slides, there are 3 parts. The first part is I'm going to just walk you through some examples, a whole abstract, and then a variety of different ways to achieve the particular moves that I've just mentioned. After the example section is a section on writing strategies, which includes some questions to ask yourself and to write in response to generate the material for your abstract. And then at the very end, additional resources that you might use as you do this work. For the abstracts you're writing for the DU Showcase, this is pretty much what they'll look like. This abstract comes from the 2019 showcase. It's 147 words. It has 5 or 6 sentences, and it's doing just those 5 things we talked about before. If you read through, the first thing you'll see, sentence number 1, is the motivation. HPV is the most common sexually transmitted infection in the United States. The population with the highest incidence of HPV is young adults between the ages of 15 and 24. Now, you might say, that doesn't seem like a motivation. This person isn't saying, here's why I wanted to do this research. And that's true. You might think of motivation as the larger motivation for your project needing to happen. Is there a scientific reason or an ecological or historical or aesthetic reason that this work needs to happen? And with that in mind, we have a few examples from different fields to think through. These are all doing that same kind of thing. Wanting to understand the forces that led to Hitler's rise in 1930s Germany feels especially urgent today. Or green space is rarely provisioned evenly in cities, and access has emerged as an environmental justice concern. Or finally, heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the US and many developed countries, and a common procedure for the treatment of heart valve disease is conventional open heart surgery. Now, these sentences aren't all identical, but they all are sort of establishing a context that tells us why the project needs to exist. What is the motivation for the work that needs to happen? Going back to our full paragraph example, the motivation is followed closely by the problem. In this case, there is no cure for HPV. Therefore, prevention and education is paramount to reduce transmission rates amongst this vulnerable population. Pretty short, pretty declarative. We just know the problem is that there is no cure. And similarly, that statement is going to be probably in the same place in every example, but it'll look very, very different depending on field. In a literature or humanities art project, it might be that a particular work hasn't been appreciated. That's true in this top example here. This is a landmark poetry collection in its lyric description of same-sex love, but a text that continues to be marginalized. Or it might be a problem that's about what we don't know. In the second example, while college preparedness programs exist, there's little information about how successful or responsive these programs may be for first-generation students. In the case of the third example, the problem might just be the goal of the study. In this case, the aim was to identify the prevalence and intersection of substance abuse, mental illness, and traumatic brain injury in a justice-involved population. So if we read that one, we understand that the problem is we don't know how to do that yet. We don't know how those three things intersect. Back to our large example, then we have the approach. And I think in a lot of cases, this is one that might take up a little bit more real estate in your abstract, because this is where you say, what exactly did you do? How did you collect data? What methods or models did you use? If you're writing in the humanities, what was your frame of reference? Or what kind of analysis did you do? What were your theories? Did you interview people? Did you test something? Did you experiment? That's all going to appear in this middle section. Again, what this looks like varies, but you can see in the three examples here that things like who was the population who participated? What kinds of existing mechanisms or models did they use? What did participants do? What kinds of experimentation happened? What sort of research did you do? You want to just name the things that you did along the way to do the work that you did. The twin section to the approach is the results. Here you say, after having done all of that stuff, here's what we found. In this case, by implementing a health education program, there was an overall trend towards increased knowledge and vaccination rates. Pretty short, and you'll notice it's really descriptive. We don't get any interpretation here. We just get a statement of what happened. And that is pretty common across fields, although occasionally there might be a little bit of interpretation that gets there. In the three examples here, you can see three versions of a results statement. First, results suggest that Lakewood and Aurora minority and low-income residents have less access to green space than do white, high-income, and more educated populations. So the result of the analysis is that some people have less access than others. In the engineering example, we showed that the presence of TAVR without removing the native valve prevents the normal blood flow around the valve, and therefore blood stays longer, and consequently, the chance of clotting and thrombosis formation increases. Having done the experiments that they did, this is the scientific finding that they made. The literature example is a little bit different, and that's why I wanted to just pause on it here. While the Netherlands has long been a leader in LGBTQ plus rights, traditions have facilitated the silencing of LGBTQ plus expression. We can infer that that part of the sentence, traditions have facilitated the silencing, is the finding. Having done some literary analysis and put that literature into context, this author has found that traditions were part of the problem that kept this particular text from being known. Finally, go back to our main text, implications. Now, this might be an interpretation of your results, but it could also be a few other things. In the implications section, you might say, here's what we now know that we didn't know before, or here's a new question that we can now ask because we did this research. Or maybe here's why it matters that we did what we did. Here's the big picture, here's the so what. In this case, it stays pretty close to the results. By increasing the students' knowledge, the students' perception of the vaccine became more positive, and that resulted in a decrease in transmission rates. We could all agree that that's a good thing, and that's an implication of the work. A couple of other examples. In psychology,